Welcome to the Data Leadership Lessons Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony J. Algman. Data is everywhere in our businesses, and it takes leadership to make the most of it. We bring you the people, stories, and lessons to help you become a data leader. So today, my guests are Len Silverston and Bob Seiner. Len and Bob have both been on the show before. Bob is the authority on Non-Invasive Data Governance, the publisher of TDAN.com, and founder of KIK Consulting and Educational Services. Len is a best-selling author of the Data Model Resource Book Series, owner of Universal Data Models LLC, and a consultant and speaker helping organizations integrate their information systems and people. Welcome back, guys.
Great to be back here.
Thanks.
All right, so we're going to jump right into it today because you guys can go listen to the previous episodes that Bob and Len were on if you want to hear their whole backstory and kind of what they're doing. But today we're here to talk and debate and explore data, facts, and stories. So I want to start it with a simple question. Why?
Perfect place to start. Well, let's let you start.
Because we don't know what's true anymore. We see politics, we see the vaccine, we see the coronavirus, we see the news, is it real or not? We see alternative facts. What is true? We see the environment, and what is true? What can we count on? What do we know?
So what's that have to do with facts and
Agreed. Show over.
Len, you and I have had several conversations about this over past several months, actually. And if people who don't know should go check out his column on TDAN right now. Well, I don't know when this will be made public, but it will still be on TDAN about data politics and polarization. And it's a great piece, but it's kind of spurred on some conversations that we had between, are there alternative facts and, what is a fact? Because the news, everything that's stated isn't fact. It's, and I think we both, or maybe all three of us agree on the fact that, the news it sensationalizes things a lot, and they're going to say things because they will, the world's coming to an end, come back at 11 and we'll tell you about it, things like that. So they sensationalize everything. And, it's almost a known fact, speaking of facts, that you can get data to say anything you want to get it to say. And, you could only provide part of the data and therefore make your case, as completely as you think. But then, so who is there a great overseer of facts that is there to say something is a fact or something isn't a fact? It's really hard. I mean, and, depending on what news station you watch or what source you go to for your news, it's not surprising that it's polarizing the heck out of people. I mean, just look at the country now. Look at the balance in the election. And if that doesn't scare you enough, then, there are people, but then people who don't agree with me would say that the things that I believe in aren't facts. So it's tough. I mean, it's a story, right? It falls back to the idea of the story that you wrote about or you talk about as well. So that's what I'll throw at you, Len, and see what you have to say about that.
Yeah, so I agree. And yet I asked a bunch of our colleagues, including we had a discussion on this, to say, what actually is the definition of data? This show is about data. What's the definition of data? And I got dozens of different definitions from different people. And one comment I got was, who cares what the definition of data is? Like, why does it matter? And the reason it matters is back to, hey, what can we trust? What do we know? What do we not know? So people will throw out in the news, well, this is data, and you look at a lot of definitions of data, and a lot of definitions of data say data is fact. On many sources.
But I can fill out a form that says that I'm 7'8".
Right.
And that becomes data. And because
Right.
it's data doesn't make it fact, right? It's not actual, right? It's not true. Again, true is probably the beauty is in the eye of the beholder too. But just to let everybody out there know, I'm 7'8", and I weigh about
It's data.
172.
It's not factual data, but it's data.
Just the 7'8" part, yes, right.
That's factual.
Yeah.
Right. So we get confused because they say, well, this is the data. There's some sources I looked at that said, well, data can sometimes be thought of as fact and sometimes be thought of as signal. It's just like if you look at the etymology of it, it comes from the word datum, which is a Latin word, which means something given. It means something is given. It exists on a database. It exists someplace. But I agree with you, Bob. It doesn't mean it's true. But in the news, people say, well, it's the data. And I think it's a very important thing to distinguish the data, which could be good quality, bad quality, which is like your whole area, Bob, is data governance, to say, hey, how good is the data? How do we make the data good? And so data could be data, but bad quality data.
Well, and like I said before, it may be a matter of only reporting some of the data and not reporting all of the data. And the question is, well, what encompasses all of the data? Well, one thing that really I yelled at the TV a lot. Let's just put it that way. Might have thrown a soft cushion against the TV at some point in time when COVID had just gotten started, because they were only reporting the number of cases. They weren't reporting the number of people that were being tested and what the percentage tested rate. And it was, I mean, they still do that some of the time. Yeah, it's not that I didn't think that it was bad, but let us know reality. So does this mean that every person we see on the street has like a 90% chance that they're infected, or is it really something a lot lower than that? I mean, we all needed to be concerned about it, and we are all still concerned about it. But other pieces of data and stuff just around COVID itself, they announced that in Brooklyn, where my daughter lives, that there's a 3% positivity rate in tests. And they report that in Allegheny County in Pennsylvania, where I live, it's it may not still be this high. I think it's gone down, but they were saying it was 20%, 25%. Right. And the fact is, in New York, my daughter could go get tested every day, every week if she wanted to. And tests were available to anybody all the time. It's not like that here. And so people that were getting tested here were more likely to be showing symptoms and things like that. So again, I don't want to make this all about COVID, but they didn't say the number of people that were being tested. They just need to put the information together. Well, what they're doing is they're putting the information together to tell a story that they want to tell, and they'll only include the data that they want. And it comes down to, what is it that they want you to think? What's going to make you come back for the 10 o'clock and then the 11 o'clock, telecast of the news? It's sad. I mean, it makes it so we don't know what's a fact and what's the whole story. And because we're data folks, all three of us, and we would we recognize that we look for all of the data, or as much as we can get. Sorry, I've been talking a while.
So here's my question. My question is when it comes, what constitutes a fact? Like, how do you move from a data? I think we kind of articulated data of various validity or quality or what have you. But like, how do we get to a point? Where is that threshold for data to become fact? I think a story is a narrative around whatever it is, but like what I think about your definition, Bob, of data governance, right? And that enforcement of authority, and like there's some stickiness to your definition of that. Mm-hmm. With respect to data, what authority or what would we be able to do to verify that data is factual? Because, and I think about like fact checkers, right? And we think about the news and things like that. There's fact checking. Well, what constitutes a fact? Or if we're writing a research paper, you had to cite your sources. Who's to say that they're correct in anything that they have?
Right.
They're just published. And
Len, when you said given, it's given, but I give my height as being 7'8".
Exactly. That's the data.
It's not measured though. So I gave that to you. So that's given. But if you take out a ruler and you measure me, I'm not going to be 7'8". So Anthony, is that what you're kind of saying, is that now it's actually been measured? And then the question becomes, is it recorded correctly?
Well, yeah.
Because I could be 6'1.5" and still put down that I'm 7'8".
Mm-hmm.
So I looked up a whole bunch of definitions of data, facts, and stories. And I liked one of them in particular about facts. It basically says a fact is something real, and it can be it's real, and it can be proven, repeated, and or observed. There's a longer definition, but that's
like that though. I think those are good criteria, that they have to be real.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
But then it comes back to Anthony's question of, well, how do you know it's real?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
If you've got a gauge I've got a thermometer. We'll talk about that as being a gauge, and I have it outside, and it's showing it's 110 degrees. The calibration on my thermometer is obviously off, because we wouldn't still have 8 inches of snow on the ground if it was 110 degrees. So, even things that are recorded, like when you're driving in your car and your car tells you you're going 65 miles an hour, if it's messed up, if your calibration is messed up, you could be not going 65 miles an hour. So, even things that are real, and I forget some of the other terms that you used, Len, to describe that. Even though it's measurable,
proven, repeated, or observed.
So, yeah, and
I like acronyms. Proven, repeated, observed.
Okay. It's again tough, right? I mean, it's is there an answer, and why do we care? Why should anybody care? Well, because we base a lot of what we do on what we hear, and it's hard just to be to be completely unimpacted by it, right? So if you're going to watch the news, or you're going to watch TV, or you're going to have any interaction with anybody, even if you just see one person and they keep telling you the same thing over and over again, I won't mention any specific person, but it's because either they believe it or they want you to believe it. And does that make it fact?
Right. And I think what you said about why do we care? That's a great question. Why do we care? I love your question, Anthony. Why do we care? What I've heard so many people these days say, I wrote about politics, a touchy subject, because I've heard so many people say, I can't even talk to my brother or to my friend, or I can't even talk to them anymore, because they believe something else is fact. They're on one side or another side. We're dividing ourselves. We're disintegrating, meaning to separate into parts or to crumble. We're falling apart. And because I have my way of being right, and you have your way of being right.
But I think our ways of being right are somewhat close together. But yes, we're not. It's not like we're on the polar opposite ends of the world.
Right.
And it doesn't help now too that technology is at such that we can be bombarded with news and information 100% of the time. It's not, maybe not while we're sleeping, but if you put your iPad next to your desk, or next to your bed, you may be.
I think it is while we're sleeping.
Yeah, I have if there's deer that walk in front of my camera in the back of the house, I get a notification. And if I don't turn off my iPad, I get up in the middle of the night, and because it tells me there's motion back there or something. But
oh wow, I
but you
got
know
deer
what?
in my background because it's my backyard.
Yeah, I love the pictures of your dear children in the background. That's very, very, very good. I stole his joke.
Uh,
Yeah, Anthony, are we going to solve this issue in this this podcast?
well, of course not. And actually, I was thinking, like, we have, we could have an academic discussion about data, facts, and stories for as long as we have. But I'm thinking about our audience, and I'm thinking, like, we have everybody from, business owners to data management professionals to data scientists and people trying to use data. What's actionable for them? Like, what can they do pragmatically to overcome the fact that there is a lot of misinformation out there, and that maybe we're asked to use data that we can't verify how reliable it is? And I probably spend more time thinking about metadata than a reasonable person should, but I think about, when we create structures, whether they're data governance or metadata structures, there's this tendency to, like, lean heavy on that enforcement of authority piece and not enough on, let's bring the nuanced context to bear and let other people figure out for them what makes sense. And so I'm really an advocate of saying, you know what, I can't decide for you. The three of us can't decide for everybody listening what data, facts, and stories really mean. People have to kind of determine that and what's actionable for themselves. But when I think about what can we do, it's, let's try to bring more context forward. Let's try to provide platforms where the nuance of the debate gets captured. I think a lot about showing my work. Like, I can get to an answer in governance, but I think it's even more important to explain to people where we're coming from and why that decision was made, so that they at least can both understand it and determine whether or not it's applicable for what their particular use cases are. Because we're not here talking about life and death usually. We're talking about trying to navigate creation of systems or business processes or do something in our organizations. And granted, what our organizations do may be really important. It's also where, if I say, here's the answer, and that answer turns out to not apply to you, and you use that answer, well, that's actually really worse, much worse than if I didn't give you anything at all.
Right. I think what's really critical in business is to distinguish when we're giving data and when we're giving stories. Mm. And if we don't, there's big consequences. At one client I had, the data steward reported that there wasn't tens of thousands of customers. There was much less customers because we got a more precise, clear definition of exactly what a customer is. And when he reported this lower number, he got fired. Because, well, wait a second, you just ruined our business. No. And that's where it's really important to distinguish what's the story going on. By the way, a story, I define it as a true or imagined connected series of events. So we can pick whatever story we want to say, well, this guy has always been a troublemaker. Now he's reporting less customers. But we really need to distinguish what are data / facts, what are these things? And then when are we cherry picking and creating some story for motivational purposes, and to distinguish those things. And by the way, stories are useful too, because they make things interesting, but we just need to know it's a story.
So but from what you just said, Len, and what Anthony, what you were just talking about, I think we have a solution to the problem. Wouldn't that be great if we could solve this problem on this webinar?
I'm in. What do you got?
I actually think that when you mentioned the word context, right? You give somebody a piece of data and you don't know what that data stands for or what that data is. Mm-hmm. I've been known to do that. Just put a number out there and not give an explanation as to what the number means. You don't know what it is unless you provide the context, and the context comes from metadata. So I'm kind of with you, Anthony. I'm working for several clients that metadata is the focus of what we're doing. And, so I always use the equation of data plus metadata, or data plus context equals information.
Mm.
So if we can get to the point where we only provide information, but then again, it would have to be all of the information, not just the part that I want you to know about. But if we could provide it without adding anything behavioral to it. So this is kind of, Len, where you come in too, is that, if we don't have an intention, okay, I want you to think this, so I'm presenting to you the information this way and this amount of information. If we ever, like NPR, if people know of NPR, that's supposed to be that way for the news. They're not supposed to show any emotion. They're not supposed to say anything that would give you an inclination to lean one way or another. But if everything that was ever presented was just being presented as information instead of fact, okay, I just solved the problem. Well, how long have we been on, Anthony? I think that we solved the problem in 30 minutes or less. So that's what I think. I mean, the context is so important, and every organization I work with, they want to get more confidence in the data that they use. And it's impossible to get that level of confidence unless you add metadata to it, unless you add the context to the data. Mm-hmm. And I could give you a figure and you don't know what it is. Is it an address, a quantity? Is it a dollar amount? What the heck is it? You need the metadata. And I talk a lot about data governance, but then the metadata is not going to govern itself either. So you need metadata governance because you need somebody to define, produce, and use metadata the same way. So I don't know, maybe that gets us a little bit, it doesn't solve the problem of polarization, but if it was just provided to us as information with context of the data, and then we could make our own, draw our own conclusions from it, maybe the world would be a better place. I don't know.
Now, I think that goes a long way, Bob. It's good to say, hey, let's not, because people cherry pick data and they use it to manipulate things. So yeah, you provide the context in all these business settings or world settings, that's useful. Then we have another issue, which is data storytelling is this huge field in our business. And one of the reasons it's huge is because advocates of it say data and information is boring. It doesn't involve emotions. I mean, movies are all based upon emotion and excitement. And look what happened, and create this big picture of what happened. And so if you just present the information, people lose interest. It's like, yeah, okay, so.
But a movie is a story, though. A movie is that series of events that you were just talking about, and it's not data.
Right.
You can use the data to tell any story you want. You'll pick which data you want to use. When the story I like, or I don't like it, but I hear about a lot, is that the oceans are rising in temperature. I know, Len, you're a big environmental guy. Well, that's kind of obvious with your background and where you live. But the oceans are only rising by like 0.01 degree. But what does that mean? What type of impact does that have? The glaciers are melting. The weather is changing. But there's some people that will say, over time it's changed this much. You're talking about the number being so minute. But then the story is that minute change, it hurts all of us.
Right. In your column in TDAN, I wrote an article, "What's the Truth About the Environment?" And I talked about this to say, hey, there's a story. Yes, it's a minute amount, but then environmentalists say, yeah, but it's going to go up exponentially with all these factors. So yes, we're creating two sides of the story. One, people saying, oh, it's nothing, it's going up minutely. Other people saying it's going to go up exponentially. Mm-hmm. And then I think with these stories, one of the big human factors is, I call it data mining. This data, my way is right. It's not data mining like exploration. It's my data is right. It's going up exponentially. No, my data is right. It's minute. And we get so, as humans, we want to be right. It seems like it's this human thing to be right, and that's where we create a story to be right.
Well, or is it I want to believe what I want to believe?
Yeah.
It's not necessarily that it's right, because of the being right again comes back to, is it a fact? Is
Right.
it repeatable? Is it all of those things that you just talked about?
Right.
So it's not a matter of, if I choose to believe something and there's nothing that you can tell me, no numbers that you can give me to persuade me something different, that's my, you heard the expression, that's my story and I'm sticking to it. I
Right.
mean, it's a real thing, right? It's one of the reasons we have polarization the way we have it right now, is because people aren't willing to listen, and that it could be it could be both directions, right? It could be I'm not willing to listen, and it could be other people aren't willing to listen to what I believe. So wish we
Yeah.
could solve this problem, man. It would be so much better if we did that.
Part of the problem is that thinking is exhausting. It's
That's why my head hurts. Yes.
I mean, seriously, like it's much easier to say, you know what? I don't even need this data. I got my story. I can pick and choose what I want into it, but I know the answer already. And
Right.
it's a lot easier to go out and support that by picking out data that looks like it supports it, or what have you. It's a lot harder to say, I truly want to be data driven. I don't know. And I'm trying to find an answer, and I'm open to all of the possibilities, and I'm skilled enough to not accidentally skew the results to where I think it already is. Because like most misinformation isn't created because people are intending to misinform, or at least I think so. But it's because the data is misinterpreted due to biases that are either implicit or explicit, but are there for sure. And so it's it's really hard. Like if you're questioning every time you get a new nugget of anything and you're reconsidering everything because of it, you're going to be really tired at the end of it. That is the one thing I know for sure.
Just explains why my head just explodes at the end of every day.
What I noticed in politics is, if we could talk about kind of a touchy subject these days, is does the data even matter? Do the facts even matter? People, when you look at polls, are on one side or the other side. Especially in our U.S. system, we have a two-party system. Most of the world is more than two parties, so we are set to be bipolar. But it doesn't even matter sometimes if you give data or you give facts. And then to top that off, you say, well, is it a fact that the election was mishandled? Did ballots get filled out incorrectly? And back to proven, repeatable, and observed. And people argue on both sides of it. So how do you know if it's a fact or not?
You know what? It would be a terrible day when data doesn't matter. Not just to us professionally, but it will be a terrible day. And you know what? I don't even think that we can get to a day where data doesn't matter, because it's going to be inherently built into our thought process. I know that when I wake up at a certain time of the day, how long it takes me to get ready and get in my car and get downtown and get to my parking spot to get to my office on time. That's all data. We can't, we're not writing that data down, but that is data. And you know what? And if we're naive, and when we get a new job, we think it's going to take a lot less time to get to the office, we're going to learn really quickly. We're going to pay consequences for not using the data to adjust our schedules based on that data. So we won't. It's going to be impossible to get away from data. So if you really want to know why should we care, just look to our daily lives. Hey, I know, you know certain things, and it's all based on experience, and experience, it becomes data. Even if it's one day experience in that example that I used, it's still data related. So, it would be bad for all of us if we just started to say, I don't, I'm not going to care about data at all. It's now more than ever. We are in, if we're not in the information age, I don't know what you would call it, the digital age. You just can't get away from it. So it's a nice question to ask is, could we live without it? I don't think so. I think it would. I can't even imagine. That would be a great column to write, Anthony. Something like that. A world without data. That would be an interesting story to tell, no doubt. I don't even know if it's even possible to do that. So
I can't even think about baseball without data. Like it's
a
world without data. It's like
yeah. You guys really, I have like another life where I do Zen with Len and spiritual practices, and I have a Zen master I've been studying with for like 20 years. And one of the things he says all the time when people get wrapped up in emotions and reactions and stories is stop. What's the data? He says that all the time, like stop. Because so I agree with you, Bob. It would be a terrible world, but that's kind of a lot of the world we live in sometimes, where people are so wrapped up in emotions and stories, we lose we lose the reality, the data, the facts. Like what are really the facts and the data? And that's actually the practice of Zen or awareness of what is real.
Well, and you know what? If we need to draw from our experience, and I think this is true for every single person out there, and any living creature would be the same way. We've got to learn from that. And I think, Anthony, you were getting to this a little bit earlier, is we've got to use our brain and take something that is said to us, that or some numbers or whatever that we see, and make a decision as to whether or not we trust that information or that data and that information is correct. Because again, like you said, I could report that I'm 7'8". From experience I know from seeing both of you at events and conferences, hopefully we'll get back to that soon, and I'm not 7'8" unless I've grown, significantly since the last time that we've seen each other. So we've got to use our experience to make that differentiation between what's real. Again, Len, one of the words that you used, it's real. What's real and what's not. Yeah. And if we only go to a source that is sharing BS, things that aren't real, we're very much going to be leaning that direction, no matter which direction it is. Even politically speaking, if you're only believing one thing to be real, I have friends that I'm not as friendly with anymore. Getting to what you said, Len, and Anthony, you've said it, or we've talked about it, that I just don't understand how they believe certain things to be real, and it's changed my opinion of them, not on purpose. I wasn't out to change that opinion, but it's changed my opinion. I can't help it, because what I know to be real is different than obviously what they know to be real. And so is data is something that's measurable. It's all these different dimensions of data, but it's got to be, experience has got to be added to that, and then we've got to all make our decisions as to what we feel is real, what data we believe and we don't believe, and not always be somebody that can it's always good to have a good story, right? But it depends on what the story is telling you. If the story is telling you something that's just complete BS, then you've got to have the experience to be able to say, what, I question that. That doesn't look right to me. And Anthony, that keeps coming back to you've got to get people, building people's confidence in the data. And I know in your job, and I know in all of our jobs, is really tantamount to success. If you can get the data to be trusted and for people to use it, then we're being successful in our job.
Yeah. So I want to take this conversation. I want to take it from the relatively high level abstraction that it's at right now and bring it way down to something very relatable. I want to talk about how I buy stuff on Amazon, because here's how I buy stuff on Amazon. So if I'm trying to debate, like I've tried to find a good face lotion for a long time, and I haven't been able to find one that I like. It's too greasy
I
or
think
whatever.
the one
So
you're working now or it looks just fine.
no, it's not about the cosmetic side. I got that covered. But it's really about saying, I need something that has certain attributes, and I look for it, and I look at the Amazon metadata and all of that, and I try to find that list of the ones that make sense. And I go through that process and I look at different options. But how do I make the actual purchase decision? When do I actually decide to say this is the one I believe that is worth my dollars to go do? So there's a price factor, certainly. There's the metadata of like, this is what Amazon tells me they say about this product. That's fine. But I look a lot at the reviews. And I look at the reviews and I look at the ratings. Like, I just straight up ignore anything that's under 4 stars. So let's just rule that out right away. But then I look at the ones, and this is the pattern I've identified in myself. And I'm curious how you guys do it. But both, like, how should we be doing this in this kind of realm, and how does it extend to our businesses? So I look at the actual reviews and I look at a lot of the positives. I want to see a good positive trend. I want to see, like, and I want to understand what people are saying they like about it. I want to see where they're like, I still give it 5 stars, but this is one thing that I thought was a little bit different. Oh, it was smaller than I thought, or it was bigger than I thought, or it was greasy, or whatever it is, right? And then I look at some of the negative ones. When somebody's like 1 star and it's like broken sentence, and then like they don't even have a point, like, I'm like, okay, well, they're just mad about something, I disregard that. But then when there's one that like tells a story of like, I was expecting this, but I got this, and this is why it was bad. That story, that one negative review, tends to carry much more weight in my mind than all of those positive reviews. Those establish a trend, but then the outliers, those stories, both positive and negative, but the negative ones are especially important, help me understand a context and uniqueness where I'm like, ooh, that sounds like what I'm thinking. This person makes some really good points, and it may help me, I think, make a better purchase decision because I avoid some of those things that are beneath the surface level reviews. But I don't know if I tend to overweight those too much because they were articulate in that thing that I'm particularly concerned about, versus should I be taking a much more just purely quantitative thing and say, well, it's 4.7 stars, this seems good, and just go with that, versus trying to dig deeper into the qualitative side of those. So in your data management perspective, what do you guys think? How should we be doing this as individuals? And then how does it extend to the business?
There's more numbers to it. First of all, I think if there's more reviews, that helps. Mm-hmm. I mean, whether they're, because again, if there's 3 reviews and 2 of them are 5 and 1 of them is 1, it's going to give them a 3-point something rating,
right,
or something like that. So I'm actually very different from you, Anthony, in that I go and I look straight to the ones. And if it says, oh, the package was busted up, so I won't order from them again, or I ordered a dozen and only 11 came, I figure that the overall rating wouldn't be up in the 4 or 5 range if that was actually something that reoccurred all the time. Mm-hmm. So, but this is very pertinent to our discussion because it's the data, right? And it's data that we use. The way that I go about it is I start with the low ones first, because the easy ones, it's very easy to say, yeah, this is great, this product's great, I suggest it, I recommend it. The ones that are low, that have a story to tell, have something that is believable, I, rather than, like I said, 11 of 12 showed up instead of me getting all of them, there was 1 missing. Companies aren't going to get away with that. They're not going to have that many good ratings if that happens. So that's kind of, I am very data driven that way as well. I don't do that intentionally, but it's kind of built into, I'll use the price and all those things. What do you do, Len? Do you shop on Amazon, Len?
I shop on, my wife calls it the evil empire. She's like, why are you doing that? But the most important thing is I have all these, even though I've studied Zen and all this stuff, I have the same thing as every human. We make decisions on emotions. We make decisions on stories. So there was a book and an audio series called Switch by Chip and Dan Heath. And they talk about an analogy of the elephant and the rider. The elephant is the emotions or the story, and the rider, the very small thing kind of directing it, is the data. And what they say is, hey, the key is, like you said, Bob, let the data drive it. But we get on Amazon, and I have to admit, I've made a lot of purchases on Amazon where it's like, oh, I'm excited. So what I found the most important thing to do is to stop, is to wait, is to not get it right away. So that if I look back in a day and I say, wait a second, that $500 shirt that looked really exciting, maybe it's not worth it. Of course, I did get this.
That's
shirt.
why you look like that all the time, because you buy $500 shirts, and I buy a Grateful Dead T-shirt.
So the key thing is not, like you said, it's a sad fact when it's a sad idea when we lose sight of the data and the facts, but the stories and the emotions. Everybody knows that in boardrooms, decisions are not only Amazon decisions. They're driven. That's why data storytelling is so big. They're driven by emotion. So I think we have to do is stop and not have this reactive kind of pleasure instinct, pleasure versus pain instinct, and just get back to the data and realize, wow, I bought this expensive product because of reviews or the words that they used. Wow.
It seemed cool at the time, right? It was, I can use one of those. I'm finding a way to use that. Yeah.
So it's like taking a step back, which is a huge practice, and it's the practice that we have to do. By the way, that's why the media is how it is. It's driven by emotion and ratings, and it's actually driven by one-sidedness. So it's hard to find a neutral source. Neutral is boring. Data and facts are important, but they're boring.
And people are going to watch. That's when I talk about sensationalism, and the world's coming to an end in 2 hours. Stay tuned at 11. We know it's happening. It may have happened between now and then, but come see how it ended out for all of us.
Well, and guys, we might have to do our own little cliffhanger for next time because we're out of time for today. And this went by fast, and I really enjoyed it. I could literally have you guys on the show every week, and we can just pick a new topic and talk about it. I may follow up with you on that offline, but I really appreciate you guys coming on and talking about this. It's been a lot of fun, and I think hopefully it's been insightful and interesting for the folks listening.
Thank you so much,
Anthony. I always appreciate it, and let's keep working on answering these questions. And I don't know if we'll come to an answer, but we can come to an answer, but it may not be the answer. So.
And hey, exploring the questions is a lot of fun, and I think there's some value in that too. So thank you again, both of you, and thank you all for watching or listening today. You'll find links and more information about today's topic in the show notes. Subscribe to our show on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Visit Algman.com to learn more about Algman data leadership and the many ways we can help you become a data leader. Stay safe during these unusual times, and go make an impact.